Maine, and not much bigger than Maine, but closer to U.S. than the European Union. However, a word on Canada. Canada, each province is responsible to manage its resources. The federal government has an overarching policy that touches on energy in Canada, but each province has its own responsibility. It sets its rules. It invites industry to come, and industry could have 10 different platforms to work from when they work in Canada, because each province does it differently. Shale gas is relatively new to eastern Canada. Offshore Nova Scotia has had shale gas for 25 years. In fact, a lot of this gas from offshore Nova Scotia ends up in the U.S., particularly the Boston area. And New Brunswick, what you see here on the map, is the lower part, those squares that are yellow, and all the lower part of the map, that's the shale deposit in New Brunswick. The upper part has no shale. What's interesting about this shale is that it is close to a kilometer. I have to change, I guess, but you must all know what a kilometer is. A kilometer is good. A kilometer to a kilometer and a half in thickness. So there's a lot of gas, and it's a special form of gas when you have to extract that, compared to most of the gas in the U.S., which is much, the deposits are much shallower. So it does create an interesting problem for industry. So what we've done in New Brunswick is many other places, shale gas has opponents, proponents, and people who are indifferent. And they go from one side to the other depending on the debate. So for the last 5 or 6 years in New Brunswick, we've had a series of debate. And from the debate, I was asked by the province then to go and see what could be collected from this debate. What can we do? Is there anything that we can do to pull all of this together? And I wrote a report, which you can get on the website. It's called Path Forward. And this is the report that we moved from. So I'll go ahead and come back. The main issue from the public forums, but I would say that the first three are very important and in priority. The first one that came through was government integrity. People do not believe government. So that doesn't matter what they say, what they write, they don't believe them. And they have all kinds of reasons why they shouldn't. And they told us all the reasons why they shouldn't. The other one is water contamination. Being a rural province, people are very concerned with contamination at the water table. So losing your well, if you live in is groundwater integrity. The next one is the well integrity, the engineered well. How safe is it? What are the issues associated with it? What is a leaky well? What does it leak? And the third issue was the chemicals associated with fracking. What chemicals do we use? I mean, during the hearings, I heard 160,000 chemicals was the high end, to 20 chemicals, and any number in between. So what kind of monster are we putting in the ground at 160,000 chemicals in this water slurry that we're going to put down 2,000 kilometers, about 2 miles, 2 to 3 miles deep underground? And what happens when that's going to come back to us? So understanding what happens to the water that you pump into the ground and understanding what happens to the chemicals was a very important component. And you can see there are others. I won't touch on the others, but then it falls into health, risk, safety, etc. But this is a summary of what the concerns were in New Brunswick. So following hearing all of these concerns and knowing that the province had a policy to move forward with the shale gas that we have in the province, debate, because now it's a dialogue of the deaf. No one listens to anyone, and the only reason you get into a debate is to see if you can shout louder than the other one and longer. But at the end of the day, there isn't much that's been learned, and you haven't moved anywhere further. So in my report, I indicated that an independent body separate from government should examine the science surrounding energy development in New Brunswick, if we are going to move forward at all. And it would be focused on science evidence-based information to support policy decision and provide advice to the minister and provide information to the people. And the government bought into that recommendation, and they named me to set up that process. And it's quite rare that you see in 12 months from the start of the consultation, bringing together the report, the government funding the institute, because the government decided to fund. I heard a while ago the previous speaker said governments have to put the money into it. They funded the institute. And the institute then has some components to it. First of all, the institute started by looking at what the stakeholders have put together, and the stakeholder issues. And these were from the public consultations, from previous public consultations, and from the one that I conducted. In those consultations, there were a series of issues which I thought were very important if we're going to move forward. And one of them was compensation. And they're not in any order, but I'll go through them. The compensation. People, if they lose their well, want to know they're going to be compensated, and they're going to not have to argue with company A, B, or C to get compensation and get a new well. Or any compensation for truck falls and soils your land, or chemicals fall, your water brings chemicals to your land. And my recommendation was that if people are going to have faith in government, they don't want a process that goes through government. So I propose that it be an independent ombudsman's office. It's going to be headed by a chief justice, a retired chief justice, and the chief justice is going to receive each well that's drilled in New Brunswick. Companies have to put forward a bond for the well. The bond is $100,000 for each well, and so if you get 10 wells to a pad, it's $1 million. That money goes to a fund. It'll be administered by this individual ombudsman, and he will decide if person A, B, or C gets compensation. So there's no going through the court. There's no arguing with the company. Government and the company will then argue with their lawyers, as long as they want, as to who should pay or why we shouldn't pay, etc. But the individual has received compensation. And 35% of the people that were against the process agreed that if they were assured of compensation and they were assured that safety was going to be a primary driver, that they might agree to it. Doesn't say would, might. But with time, so you're looking at the compensation. The other one was setting regulations, and the regulations and operating regime. Following the public consultation, the government then put forward rules and regulations for operating in shale and gas exploration in New Brunswick. Companies have to abide by these rules and regulations. Some of these touch on some of the issues that were put forward a while ago, were the chemicals. Chemicals have to be registered in New Brunswick. They have to be registered with government, and we have two major health boards, one French, one English. The health practitioners at the health boards have access to this database and all the toxicology information that's associated with it in case they would need to treat someone who has come in contact. So the information still stays confidential, but within the system, it's available to any frontline doctor that's treating a person that may have come in contact with chemicals. And one of the issues is the health, and one of the issues was chemicals. People wanted to know what happens to the chemicals. There are more to go ahead with the chemicals, but in the first step, that is a registry of chemicals is essential. The next, I'll move over to the left side then. The assessment of the status of knowledge. In the Institute, we have pulled together a group of scientists. There are 7 scientists who serve as the management science, hydrofracking, or geology and hydrogeology. And I'm the chair of that group at the present time. And we've brought together approximately 20 fellows from across Canada and the U.S. who will serve as the research guidance and undertake the research issues that are brought forward from the consultation. And we've also put in place a round table, a public round table, which will involve all of the stakeholders on a continuing basis, where information can be shared, the research that's undertaken is brought back, and it includes Aboriginal, environmentalists, the pros, the cons, industry. Everyone is represented at the table. There are 25 seats at the table. And we're having the first meeting of that group next Thursday. So they will share information. We hope to have everybody on the same level field of information. We will debate the issues, and the issues they come up, they will recommend to the Scientific Advisory Committee that they would like additional information on this because these are gaps, and these gaps need to be filled. So this is the process that we have to enhance the understanding, to integrate science, and to move the science into the policy realm, because the Institute reports directly to the Minister, who reports to the Cabinet through an annual report that is made public and moves up through the process. So associated with this, we've also identified communication as being an important component. So we're pulling together now a website, communication strategies aimed at various sectors of society. And with the communication strategy, we're looking at holding annual conferences which will focus on various topics associated with either the economy. One of the issues that people are also afraid of is that if you bring shale gas development, then every community is going to lose its soul because it becomes a mega industrial village, and the soul of the village disappears. It just flies away, and people are very concerned with that. Other issues that they have is the amenity of living in a small village, because we have small villages, 800 people, 1,000, 2,000 is a big village. If you put 1,000 trucks hauling water through a village where you normally see 2 or 3 trucks, and you're trying to go to the grocery store, the post office, or whatever, then you have a major disruption. So how can we address those? So the Institute is going to look at, for example, in New Brunswick, on the slide that I showed you, if you look through New Brunswick, a lot of that land is Crown land, which is owned by government. We're looking if the industry does move ahead and maybe moving water through a pipeline and moving the sand that's needed on the narrow gauge railway, which you could build if you're looking at 20, 30 years industry. But we can do that. So moving the trucks away from the communities. So this is the major focus that we've brought together for governance in New Brunswick, and we've moved beyond just talking about it. We're doing it. And next week, Thursday and Friday next week, I will be in Yellowknife with the Minister of Energy of Canada and all the ministers of energy from all the provinces in trying to get a harmonized approach as to how you do it right across Canada. Because right now it's a quilt work approach. So essentially, this is the Institute's major components. I'll go quite quickly. You can look at my report if you want to know more, and I got cards on the table. You can look at these. One of the issues is that we've involved major universities within New Brunswick and in Canada into looking at the various components. And they don't only touch on science, they also will touch on economics, health, etc. There's a monitoring program associated because people want to know if what you say is going to happen, is going to happen. So one of the issues we have already put in place this summer is seismic activities. People have told us that if you take the gas off the ground, you're going to increase the seismic activity. So this summer, we installed with the Geological Survey of Canada 8 to 10 near-surface monitor, and that's 10,000 meters to surface, to capture very minute seismic activities if they happen. So this will be, we're collecting this data. We have we have 2 fellows that are involved in helping us. They'll put the analysis together. Our data is going to be published on the website. Anyone can go see the data. We will publish the reports, analyze the data, publish our conclusions. If you want to take it, analyze it, and show that we've done a poor job, go right ahead. The data will all be there in full detail. The communication is a very important component that will overarch all of this as we move along. So that's the Energy Institute. We've also put in place a risk assessment model. I won't touch on that, but every issue, all of our information is going to go through a rigorous risk assessment process. And, okay, finish. I'm just going to then say, if you want anything, and we also, for the roundtable, the last thing I will say is that we have a consensus decision model because all the decisions at the roundtable will have to be on consensus. So we've developed a model, and hopefully we'll see if it works next week. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have some time for discussion and questions before our final panel. I wanted to make sure we got to our final panel on time because some people have to leave early. So I would like to take the first question from Kate Sinding.
Thank you, Susan. I'm Kate Sinding. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And this is a question for Dr. Bomberg. I wanted to probe a little bit more on the sustainability principle that you raised, and in particular this notion of fossil fuel lock-in, which was something that I thought was notable to see that you raised, perhaps more notable that it's the first time I think that it's been raised at all in today's discussions, and it's been absent from as far as I can tell, sort of the premise for the discussion that the workshop is having, and yet it seems to me that tackling that is key to answering the question of sustainable shale gas development or the possibility of such development. It also strikes me, and I think you suggested this, that it may be key to breaking through the incredible divisiveness that exists in terms of the rhetoric at either end of the spectrum, certainly in this country. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how that conversation is playing out, if it's playing out in the EU, in terms of if this is a bridge fuel, how do you ensure that it's a bridge fuel and that the transition actually happens?
Thank you, because your last point is precisely where the debate has left off, namely, is shale and the development of shale, should it be seen as the first step, as this transition fuel? If so, then development of shale can receive the support of many of the current opponents. However, there are compelling arguments backed up by recent investment patterns and in renewables to cast doubt on whether shale would be a transition fuel. So the idea that renewables, investment in renewables, support for renewables, which has been very high in the EU, that this is the support for that is already starting to diminish. So the ability of sustainability as a transition fuel to depolarize the debate that hasn't yet happened. However, I still think it's precisely because of that. I think that if sustainability becomes central to the discussion, then it's going to be more likely that decisions on shale, might take a different track, but it's more likely that shale will proceed as a transition fuel than if sustainability were not entered into the discussion.